I mean, as I pitched to these guys originally, the AMC network, we're going to take Mr. Chips and we're going to transform him into Scarface.
Maybe you can give us an example of any kind of theme or tone that you didn't anticipate would be important that's kind of bubbled up.
I guess family. I didn't know the show would be as much about family as it's turned out to be. Family, you know, steal from the best. I mean, we think more and more, my writers and I think more and more about The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. We quote it all the time in the room. We deconstruct it, and this was never intended to be any kind of an homage or a continuation or a Southwestern version of The Godfather, but we find ourselves more and more inspired by it. And, you know, that movie, certainly those two movies, all three, I guess, really speak to family. It's very much a theme of family and the idea of a man in the midst of providing for his family, doing right for his family, utterly destroys it. Right. So those parallels were never intentional from day one, but they are definitely there, and we think about them more and more.
I'm also curious about Heisenberg. You know, when I heard that, of course, I loved it immediately because it's, you know, the name of a Nobel laureate who founded the uncertainty principle. But I was wondering if there was any other symbolism, or was I looking into it? Was Einstein taken? You know,
well, Heisenberg, we were naming it after Werner Heisenberg, definitely. When Walter White, at a certain point, if you haven't seen the episode, he walks into the lair of a local Albuquerque drug kingpin, and the guy says, "What's your name?" And he says, and he just does it as a lark because he's not going to give the guy's real name ever. He says Heisenberg, and the idea is, we never explain it, but the idea is that it's a name that pops into his mind, and he is. I mean, we're shouting out to Werner Heisenberg and his uncertainty principle.
It just says if the more detail that you have about something, the less you know about it, and so that's why I also thought the Heisenberg was, you know, because we thought we knew this guy, and you know. Wow. But I'm just making that
deeper.
up.
I like that.
I
like your answer better than mine. I like that.
I
like the way you said that. That's cool.
Yeah. So Walter's life is really bad, and so I want to know, from the writing point of view, is this a cathartic act? Is this mischievous? Let me tell you what I did to Walt today. I mean, I'm wondering what your thinking is.
Well, you know, I feel bad more for the other characters around him than for Walt, because Walt makes these choices, and he does not have to. Maybe he did early on. Well, that's arguable, certainly. You don't have to. When you get a cancer diagnosis, the first thing that springs to mind is not necessarily, well, I'm going to cook crystal meth. But I mean, we've given him even less reason to do it now than he had originally. Right. So I'd feel bad for Jesse more often than not, because Jesse kind of hangs on. He's like the dog that's always being kicked, you know. This poor guy. But we don't do it to be mischievous. I mean, you know, first and foremost, we're trying to be entertaining. I mean, this show is definitely not a show for everybody. It's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark show, and it demands a lot of attention because it's so hyper-serialized. But but it is ultimately an entertainment, and it's not. There's no political or social axe to grind. It's just a character study more than anything. So. You know, he's reaping what he has sown, and his family is reaping what he is sowing, and his friends, his partner, and you know, it's a little biblical without the religion. It's like old school, Old Testament kind of. There's some Old Testament kind of judgments that seem to be passed on him without the actual religion of it. But it's just first and foremost meant to entertain and I suppose be cathartic in the sense of, you know, you watch. Like when you watch a gangster movie, you watch Scarface, you watch The Godfather, whatever, you're intrigued by the characters, but also thinking, ooh, when they get their comeuppance, you know, it's kind of cathartic, I suppose, as a viewer, because it's like, ooh, I get to watch from the safety of my living room, and I'm not actually going through it myself, but I can kind of live it without actually suffering it. So I suppose there's that. You know.